This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material.
Objectives:
To able to understand globalization as a multifaceted phenomenon, a dimension that is filled with range of norms, claims, beliefs, and narratives. To able to grasp information on the different claims of globalization. What does globalization means? Globalization is the word used to describe the growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, and populations, brought about by cross-border trade in goods and services, technology, and flows of investment, people, and information. It is the process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments worldwide. Globalization has accelerated since the 18th century due to advances in transportation and communication technology. This increased global interaction has caused a growth in international trade and the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and culture.
Now, let's talk about the 6 core claims of globalization. Globalization means market deregulations and integrations. It is inevitable and irreversible. Nobody is in charge of globalization. Globalization will benefit everyone. Globalization will further the democracy in the world. Globalization requires war on terror.
The first claim of globalization.
I am Engine Cadet Caballero Jumerson. My topic is all about globalization means market, deregulation, and integration. So when we say integrations and deregulations of markets, what does it mean? Deregulation of market is the removal of regulations or restrictions, especially in a particular markets. It helps ensure healthy competition in the market and allows businesses to freely make effective decisions for their progress. The main aim of the regulation is to increase healthy competition in that market and drive prices down for consumers. Market integration. Market integration occurs when prices among different locations or related goods follow similar patterns over a long period of time. Group of goods often move proportionally to each other, and when this relation is very clear among different markets, it is said that the markets are integrated. It is used to identify a phenomenon in which markets of goods and services that are somehow related to one another being to experience similar patterns of increase or decrease in terms of the prices of those products. So now, why does globalization means market deregulation and integration? It is simply because economic integrations and deregulation measure the impact of globalization on individual economies. People, companies, and economies are more integrated and interconnected than ever before. Global integration helps facilitate connection, which leads to specialization, innovation, and economic progress. And global deregulation did result in thought competition acts as spur to a greater efficiency, leading to lower cost prices for the consumers around the globe. Remember that the average cost of goods is a key aspect that the standard of living. It gives them access to a wider variety of goods.
Good day, everyone. I am Chris Arnel Alvor, and I'm here to talk about the number 2 topic of our group 2, which is globalization is inevitable and irreversible. When we say inevitable and irreversible, what does it mean? Do you have any idea? Well, inevitable meaning something that is certain to happen or unavoidable, cannot be prevented, while irreversible means impossible to change back to a previous condition. Now, why does globalization is considered to be inevitable and irreversible? Well, it goes like this. Globalization is irreversible because it results from a powerful innovation trend which is not about to end. The starting point was the fall of transport costs regarding both goods and persons. Oil price rise has not been able to restrain it. Economic consequences have been huge, but new opportunities were opened to produce with the access to far located markets. Information exchanges development has followed. It was not limited to enterprises. The computer became a mass market product. Network capacity has increased in a few years by huge proportions. During the same time, a lot of powerful communication tools with the cost prices completely changed the way people were thinking about distance. World trade. World trade development has brought huge changes to the economy that was now impossible to change and drag down to its previous shape. Globalization includes the interconnectivity of economy, politics, and culture around the world, and it makes it clearly inevitable and entirely unavoided. We are living in time where modern technology increases, which makes our work become easier. It is inevitable because it is an evolutionary necessity. In other words, the fast globalization of the world's economies in recent years is largely based on the rapid development of the science and technologies, has resulted from the environment in which market economic system has been fast spreading throughout the world and has been developed on the basis of increasing cross-border division of labor that has been penetrating down to the level of production change within enterprises of the different countries. Globalization, at its most basic, means simply the long-term, secular trend towards ever greater interpenetration and interdependence of the world's economy. And this is indeed inevitable. Globalization is not something specific. To now, it has been us since the beginning of mechanized industry. Well, we keep talking about globalization as if it was something man-made, but the truth, we are simply following, adjusting to the nature's intelligent evolutionary plan that is simply inevitable and irreversible.
The third core claims of globalization is that nobody is in charge of globalization. When can we say that nobody is in charge of globalization? Robert Hermat says, the great beauty of globalization is that no one is in control. Globalization is not controlled by any individual, any government, and any institution. The meetings, the groups, the foundations that all work on spreading new liberal principles and new world order principles have been deeply rooted in ancient history. Think of it. Even on the most local level, no one can know all the various intersections between people and businesses, nor what is most wanted, when or what new innovations will come along, or who will enter and leave the market. What the best way to make something, or what public taste will be like in the future, or how important specific goods and service to any good individual with respect to all the goods or services an individual might choose any specific time and place and set of circumstances. Nobody is in charge of the economies of the world. Most countries are very possessive of their own economy. Stigger says, if market forces decides our history's path, no social class or group can dominate the globalization. Globalization should not include the goal of any particular class or group. Globalization doesn't promote a certain agenda of any specific class. In a sense, of a globalists are not demanding their own agenda on people.
Globalization will benefit everyone. Globalization allows companies to find lower-cost ways to produce their products. It also increases global competition, which drives prices down and creates a larger variety of choices for consumers. Lowered costs help people in both developing and already developed countries live a better lives of money. Globalization impacts business in many different ways, but those who decide to take international expansion to find several benefits, including 6 globalization benefits. 1. Access to new cultures. Globalization makes it easier than ever to access foreign culture, including food, movies, music, and art. 2. The spread of technology and innovation, meaning countries around the world remain constantly connected, and so knowledgeable and technological advance travels quickly. Lower costs for products. Globalization allows companies to find lower cost ways to produce their product. It also increases a global competition, which drives prices down and creates a larger variety of choices for consumers. Higher standard of living across the globe. Developing nations experience an improved standard of living, thanks to globalization. Five, access to new markets. Business gain a great deal from globalization, including new customers and diverse revenue streams. Companies interested in these benefits look for flexible and innovative ways to grow their business overseas. Access to new talents. In addition to new markets, globalization allows companies to find new specialized talent that is not available in their current market. Globalization provides great opportunities for future, not only for countries but also for the others. Its many positive aspects include an unpredicted expansion on investment and trade, the opening of the international trade of the world, most populous regions and opportunities for developing countries to improve their standard of living, the increasing rapid dissemination of information, technological innovation, and the proliferation of skilled jobs. These characteristics of globalization have led to considerable expansion of wealth and prosperity in the world. Hence, we are.
Globalization will further the democracy in the world. Democracy. Democracy is a cornerstone of human dignity and the good society. And a public should shape its own destiny even if some might doubt the wisdom of a certain of democratic decisions taken. A society that is not striving after democracy tends to be less worthy and also more dangerous place. Globalization is complex and controversial process. It has changed the world in many ways and has brought several countries together. However, as well as bringing countries together in some ways, it has also driven them ways. And a part of one of the most controversial changes it has made is to the political culture of many countries. Around the world, many scholars such as David Held would agree that democracy is commonly being regarded as the best form of government. Sophie Crockett, 2011. Many advantages of globalization helps promote democracy and the deduction of information, traveling costs mean that people have access to a lot more information, not only from their government but from all over the world. This means the democracies can now promote their values and ideals to autocratic countries a lot more freely. And as autocracies have diminishing control over information, reducing borders strengthens the distribution of democratic values over borders. The democracies border non-democratic countries. The more that chances that country has becoming democratic. In addition, with the increase in the demand for human rights and humanitarian intervention in countries which abuses power, democracy is progressively becoming the only alternative to autocratic regimes as the preponderance of states withholds democratic values. It is expected that any other state that is non-democratic is in a violation of human rights, as they are not allowing their citizens to voice their opinion and have a say in the way their government is run. However, how does globalization help the spread of democracy around the world? So globalization encourage democratic situation which promote democracy as the global market relies on capitalized democratic values. It is inevitable that organizations that reinforce these values are rewarded, meaning they can expected into countries with other forms of government and promote these ideals. And democracy, free market, freedom, and free trade are similar according to the globalist belief, although democracy and freedom relate to a certain form of the political system, while free market and free trade refer to specific type of economic system. In terms of the political system, it focuses on the act of voting, where we have the freedom to pick our leaders for our countries. In terms of this economic system, it focuses on free trading, where the government tariffs, quotas, and subsidies and restriction do not prevent goods and service from being bought and sold across international borders. Those people who suffer from social and economic inequalities and not having any share in power see a hope in democracy as a citizen living in a society. In a society, in a country. And I encourage the thought that expanding democracy through globalization is make people closer and more united. So that will be all for the globalization will further the democracy in the world. And this is French, by the way, and thank you for watching.
Hi, good evening. My name is Engine Kadit Kulanag, and I will discuss to you about globalization requires war on terror. So what does it mean when we say war on terror? As George Bush said last 2001, war on terror is a war against all those who seek to export terror and war against those governments that support or shelter them. However, it can also adverse the good effect of globalization, which are the imbalance of power, imbalance of players, and power vacuum. The war on terrorism was comparable to Cold War. It was intended to represent a new phase in global political relations and had important consequences for security, human rights, and international law cooperation and governance. Since public attention has shifted from globalization to the war on terrorism, this raises the question what agenda shaped the ongoing war on terrorism and how affect contemporary globalization. This discussion opened with a brief review of current perspective on globalization to serve a yardstick to measure ongoing changes. When Tarak Barkawi said, war doesn't just tear nations apart, it brings people and places close together, providing a new lens on globalization. In this environment, small cells of terrorists have become true transnational threats thriving around the world without any single state sponsor or home base. Terrorism aims to create terror, a feeling of insecurity, and an idea that leads can no longer protect those living, and has emotional impact that leaves on through its political implications. Terrorism changes people's understanding of reality. Tourist flows are also affected by terrorist attacks, and new investments are generated, particularly in security. It obliges companies to take a new measure, prompting them to monitor their staff in a new ways and based on criteria, notably religious criteria that can be highly continuous. It also impacts person's staff, person life, and how persons work. The terrorism of today is fast becoming a global phenomenon. Rather than logic exists both within and outside of the societies it affects. In return, this influences diplomacy, intelligence, and war. So if the idea that global war on terror turns out to be an instant engagement, it would become actually more important over time. For instance, Al-Qaeda operates in more than 90 countries, including our own. They can support themselves through a global network of crime, complex fundraising, operation and illicit charitable and business operations. As September 11 taught us to will we live in a world where events in a landlocked country in Central Asia can literally life and death implications for us here in America. Globalization means that we cannot isolate ourselves even if we want to. Similarly, in the Philippines, we've also experienced globalization. Way back 2017, Marawi, a place located in the Mindanao, was attacked by a terrorist group. The place was bombed and bullets were everywhere. Many died at the terrorist attack. However, as globalization started to serve terrorism, it also becoming our weapon to fight against terrorist attacks. And it is evident and seen during the Marawi siege. Therefore, due to globalization, the modernization of technologies and aspect of living were affected. Terrorism feeds exactly on it, and how would it consume and use it will vary accordingly to those terrorist groups primarily involved on it.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, classmates. I'm the Cadet Lasconia Carlo, and I'm here now to discuss the globalization requires war on terror. So this is the continuation of my group mates, which name is Divin Kabalunag. So globalization requires war on terror. So this leads to the second major factor that distinguishes today's terrorism from its processors, weapons of mass destruction. Terrorist groups today not only have global reach, but they are actively seeking to acquire and use chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons in their campaign. The attack of last September 11 served as warning of even worse to come if we do not act decisively now to prevent terrorists from acquiring weapons of mass destructions by the purchase, gift, or their own design and construction. President Bush has said, it is precisely the coming together of these two trends, terrorist groups who tap globalization to extend their power and reach and the possible spread of weapons for mass destruction, that possess the permanent security challenges of this area. In order to face the challenges, the United States has assembled one of the greatest coalition in history. Most nations of the world have at bare minimum offered political support for the global campaign against terror. 122 countries offered military forces. The cause of the war have been staggering politically, profited its reputation as an icon for democracy and justice, even among its closest allies. Terrorism stalls global trade and economic growth. The U.S. aggressive martial military strategy as the result is response to defend globalization achievements. There are still ongoing races of questions why the war or terror happens or included, but that's because it helps to fight against terrorism. And terrorism has become a global phenomenon as the result of advancement, technological developments, communications, and accessibility transportations. So the greatest method to reduce terrorism is to employ international law with the proper organization in order to build collaboration. So another example of this is, for example, globalization is where a certain place is being globalized by a good or bad leader. It is where they will have a plan to against the will of the governments that reason it will transitions into a war terror, which they want enhance the armed forces against the government forces. So if there is a war, casualty will be the innocent people and cause total damage of community. Globalized place is depend who had the full responsibility. Better to have good leaders to avoid war and can protect the entire community with peace and stable economy. So that's my understanding of the globalization of war on terror, and that's all, and Good evening again, and thank you.